Hello, folks. Let's talk about Friend of My Youth. Take a minute and get your copy of Friend of My Youth. I have a paper copy. You just are stuck with a digital one, but take a minute and get that digital copy open. Maybe you want to decide to open this video on your phone and then open your big screen to your copy of Friend of My Youth. Or maybe you just want to split your screen. Maybe you want to just put me in the background and have Friend of My Youth open on the screen. But I do need you to see your copy of Friend of My Youth so that we can scroll through, and talk about what's going on in this story. So pause me for a minute, get your copy open. When you're set, start this video again, and let's figure out Friend of My Youth. Everybody ranked Flora as most righteous, most good, most saint-like. Everybody, you all, both Block 2 and Block 4 agreed. Flora is most righteous. Let's talk about what Alice Munro is doing in this piece. Of course, we're always driving towards theme. And talking about Flora being most righteous, that didn't quite get us to theme, right? That was just ranking characters and trying to figure out what Munro is doing here with these characters. I do think it's interesting, before I start digging into Flora, think about the point of view here. I think it's interesting to think about the point of view. Our narrator of this story is someone who never lived with Flora, someone who never met Flora, who heard about Flora through her mom, who had lived with Flora and the Greaves family. That's an interesting kind of narration, right? It's very veiled. Our narrator really is very secondhand, giving us an account based on the bits and pieces she picked up from the stories that her mom told her. That's interesting. Why did Alice Munro choose to do that? She wouldn't have needed to. She could have had the mother who had lived with Flora be the narrator. She could have chosen Flora herself to be the narrator. Why did Alice Munro give us this veiled narration? I think it has something to do with theme, and most good readers would realize that. They'd be like, oh yeah, that is kind of a weird narration. Why would you do that? Oh, I wonder how does that relate to the theme? We don't really know why Ellie does what she does. We don't really know why Robert does what he does. We don't know why Flora does what she does. We don't know their motives. It's all veiled in this hidden narration, in this veiled narration. So we don't really know the motives. We can't get into the heads of anybody. The only head we're able to get into is the narrator, who never actually knew Flora, but she does give her opinion at the end about Flora. I think Munro does this on purpose. We humans, we can't know other people's motives. Just like we saw in A Rose for Emily, when we weren't able to all those townspeople were watching Emily all the time. They had no idea she had a dead guy upstairs, right? We, a reader, are in that situation right now. We're removed, and we can't really know the motives of Flora and Ellie and Robert. It's a very veiled narration. I think that has something to do with the theme. This idea that we humans can never really know the motives of someone else. Very true to human nature. Let's point out some things about Flora. You guys pointed out a lot of good things about Flora being very good, saintly, righteous. Let me point out some other things about Flora. I'm on page 1. I'm on page 1, about this far down. We get a description of the setting. When wood weathers in Ottawa Valley, my mother said, I do not know why this is, but it never turns gray. It turns black. Why did Munro include that detail? Why did she choose to put that there? Why did she tell us things turn black over there? We know the symbolism of black. It's evil, certainly very mysterious right now. Why we're opening with this symbolism of black. What's evil? What's sinister? Let's see. Let's go to page 3 right now. I'm going to start on the top of page 3. There's some good stuff up here. Flora took care of her and did all the work. Flora took care of Ellie, and Flora did all the work. She washed the clothes, tidied up the rooms, cooked the meals, served in both sides of the house, as well as helping Robert with the milking and the separating. Wow, that is really good of Flora, isn't it, to be there and take care of everything? Why does she do it? Why? Why does she take care of Ellie and Robert? And then it's still on the top of the page. I see some more symbolism. I think symbolism up here. During the first spring, my mother was there. A great house cleaning was embarked upon, during which Flora climbed the ladders herself, carried down the storm windows. She just cleaned this house, like crazy cleaning this house. Excuse me. Such need and energy possessed her that she could hardly sleep. Need to clean this house. Uh, it's described as unmerciful light coming through these clean windows. The cleanliness was devastating. Devastating. Isn't cleanliness good? Flora's hands were raw, but her disposition remained top notch. She's even described as a whirling dervish. Now, I had to look up those words. I didn't know what a whirling dervish would be, but I discovered that it's a member of a religious community who has taken vows of poverty and austerity, as someone who's known for wild or ecstatic rituals. So the cleaning is good, but it's weird the description. Why is Flora cleaning so unmercifully? And why is it described as devastating? And why is she described as a dervish? Maybe this is symbolic. Maybe Flora is trying to clean something else. Maybe her own conscience? Maybe Ellie's soul. Maybe Flora is trying to symbolically clean Ellie's soul because what Ellie did was awful. Oh gosh, Ellie, you don't do that to your sister. I'm looking still on page 3, the paragraph right in the middle. Second line, Ellie was a wreck, of course, but Flora was still superbly straight and graceful. Ellie was a wreck, of course, like she should be a wreck. And yes, Ellie, you don't do that to you don't do that to anybody, much less your sister, Ellie. Yeah, but of course she was a wreck, like she should be a wreck. And Flora is superbly straight and graceful. Good job, Flora, huh? That paragraph even describes Flora as, oh, wait a minute, wearing a black hat. If Flora is so superbly straight and graceful, why does Monroe put a black hat on her head? Let's see, which page next? I'm on page 4 right now, very top of page 4. Everybody said that Flora had behaved like a saint. Even when she went to extremes, as in dividing up the house, that was like a saint. Twice Munro used that word, a saint, and a lot of you latched onto that, and you even quoted that Flora is behaving like a saint, and that's why she is most righteous. That's why she's most good. She's number 1. Why did Munro repeat it, though? And she's behaving like a saint. Like a saint is used in both places, like a saint. So is she a saint or just trying to act like one? Okay, still on page 4, down here, down near the bottom. It says that Flora trusted fully in Robert's patience and in her own purity. And so this is when they were thinking, Flora was going to marry Robert and, let's wait a reasonable amount. And then, Dad died. And well, now we got to wait a little bit longer. Let's wait another year, Robert. She trusted fully in Robert's patience and in her own purity that they could wait a year. Living in the same house with each other, but still waiting a year. Maybe Robert got tired of waiting. But bad Robert, you don't do that. But maybe he got tired of being so pure and so good all the time. Like, why do we have to, I don't know. Maybe he got tired of waiting so long. And Ellie, no, Ellie, you don't do that. Look on page 5. First paragraph on page 5. A hurry up wedding, right? Ellie, the last line of the first paragraph, Ellie let Flora fix her up. She let herself be married. She was never wild from that day on. Yep, Ellie is wrecked. Never herself, never wild from that day on. Like she's living her life in absolute guilt and remorse. She feels so bad about what she did. She let herself be married. Never wild. She was wrecked from that day on. Ellie knows what she did was so, so bad and so wrong. She knows it, and she's living it every single day. Gosh, that's kind of harsh, huh? Poor Ellie. No, Ellie, you deserve that. You don't do that. Next line. Flora had the house divided. Why did Flora not leave? If Robert has decided, okay, Ellie is going to be my partner here and no longer Flora, why does Flora not just leave? Go start her life somewhere else. Go create a life for herself somewhere else. Why does she stay? And she divides the house. Could that be symbolic? I mean, she physically does divide the house, but she also divides that house, doesn't she? The bottom of that paragraph really starts to drive this point home that I think anyway. God dealt out punishment for hurry up marriages. So, okay, a hurry up marriage, that means you had sex before you were married, which, in some religions, you don't do that. And then, we had this baby. And so we had to have this hurry up marriage. And gosh, there are even religions. I had a friend whose mom told her this when she ended up pregnant without being married, that tragic. She lost the baby, a miscarriage, and she was devastated. And her mom said, "It's your fault because you weren't married." Harsh, harsh, harsh. That's what Munro is writing here. God dealt out punishment for hurry up marriages. God rewarded lust with dead babies, idiots, hair lips, and withered limbs and club feet, or with Flora's revenge. Because look at the next line. In this case, the punishment continued. Flora doesn't leave. Flora stays there every day, taking care of Ellie, looking so saint-like, looking so good. But is Flora just there to remind Ellie of what she's done? Flora's vengeance. Flora, that's nasty. On the bottom of page 5, Flora's reading to Ellie. Oh, Flora, that is good. Every night she reads to Ellie. Flora, you are so good. But what is she reading to Ellie? When Flora laughed, Ellie gave a whimper. Last line on page 5. Flora would pick up another book, an old book written by some preacher of their faith. There was in it such stuff as my mother had never heard. What stuff? Well, she couldn't say all that stuff that was in their monstrous old religion that put Ellie to sleep or made her pretend she was asleep after a couple of pages. All that configuration of the elect and the damned. Ooh, do you guys know about the elect and the damned? The Puritan religion did buy into this idea of the elect and the damned. It goes this way. The religious belief says that when you are born either elect or you are born damned. You don't know which one. But if you are born elect, that means you have a white soul and you will go to heaven. You're a good person. But if you're born damned, that means your soul is black. You are not a good person. You don't have a chance of getting to heaven. You will spend eternity in hell because you're a bad person. It's really weird to think about this, like you were born good or bad. Nobody knows, though, if they're elect or damned. And the belief was or is in some places that your outward behavior, your thoughts, what you do, that is like clues for yourself as to whether you are elect or damned. So like you do something good, you'd be like, oh, look at me. Maybe I'm good. Ooh, I might have a white soul. I must be elect. Or you have a bad thought about someone else. And then you're like, oh, shoot. Oh, my goodness. I cannot have those bad thoughts. I might be damned, right? Elect or damned. And so there was this belief that you were born either elect or damned. You don't know which one. Your behavior is going to indicate which one it is. And that's what Flora and Ellie, that's part of their belief. And so Flora reads Ellie books every night about the elect and the damned. Well, that's not very nice, Flora. That feels a really passive aggressive move here of telling Ellie every single night, you damned soul, you're going straight to hell. Ooh. And I like what Alice Munro writes here, but what sort of thing was that? She asked silently to read to a dying woman. The answer, that it was the only thing, if you believed it, never seemed to have occurred to her. Why does Flora read this to Ellie every single night? Why does she not leave this house? Why does she stay there every single day? Does she just want to remind Ellie every day of her mistake? I mean, Ellie, what you did was bad, but I don't know that you deserve to be tortured your whole life for it. Look on page 7. Nurse Atkinson even tells Flora right in the middle of the page, when Ellie sees you, Flora, she gets upset. Like Flora's presence alone is causing Ellie to be so upset. I wonder if maybe that's why she is so sick. All the miscarriages. I wonder if it's her conscience and her soul and her heart that's making her so sick. Almost there, you guys. A few more things. I could be pointing out more. I try not to beat these things dead, but I gotta point out some of the stuff about Flora. On page 10, this is where the narrator talks, and this is where it really hit me like, oh, I get what Munro's doing here. I'm in the middle of page 10, about right here. Our narrator says, my Flora would be as black as hers was white, rejoicing in the bad turns done to her and in her own forgiveness. So like, Flora is excited when people do bad things to her because then she gets a chance to act like she's so good. And then people say, oh, how good. Flora is so good. Yet Flora sticks around every single day to torture Ellie. Sweet little Ellie, who made one really big mistake, honey, but that was one mistake. Shouldn't she be forgiven? Does Flora have no mercy in her to forgive? Hmm. Our narrator describes Flora on that same page, page 10, as a Presbyterian witch, reading out of her poisonous book. It takes a rival ruthlessness, the comparatively innocent brutality of the thick skinned nurse, to drive her back, to flourish in her shade. Well, go nurse, way to drive her back. But she is driven back. Yeah, put Flora in her place. Maybe nurse deserves Robert more than Flora does anyway. Robert's a whole nother issue. We'll talk about Robert when we're back together in class. I don't want to talk about that over video. Robert's a whole nother issue. Let me just, the conclusion here. The conclusion. Page 13. The Cameronians, that's the religion that Flora and Ellie practice, huh? The Cameronians, I have discovered, tells our narrator tells us, are or were an uncompromising remnant of the Covenanters, those Scots who in the 17th century bound themselves with God to resist prayer books, bishops, any taint of popery or interference by the king. Their name comes from Richard Cameron, an outlawed or field preacher soon cut down. The Cameronians, for a long time, they preferred to be called the Reformed Presbyterians, went into battle singing the 74th and 78th Psalms. They hacked the haughty bishop of St. Andrews to death on the highway and rode their horses over his body. One of their ministers, in a mood of firm rejoicing at his own hanging, excommunicated all the other preachers in the world. Well, I don't know about you, but hacking a bishop to death and then riding your horse over his body, that doesn't seem like a very religious or good thing to do. In fact, that seems downright evil. Yet that's what these Cameronians are doing. I wonder if that nails home the theme. What you do. What you do matters. What's your motive? We can't know the motives because of the veiled point of view, which is true to human nature. We can't know why Flora is doing what she's doing, but it doesn't look good. Well, Ellie has lived her entire life in remorse and guilt, with Flora standing over her, rubbing in every day fresh salt into the wound. Here's what you did, honey. You're a bad person every day. And Ellie takes it because she thinks she deserves it. What Ellie did was awful, and you can't condone that. But maybe what Flora is doing is worse. Every day, Flora is torturing Ellie because of her mistake. Maybe Flora should have just moved away. Sometimes how we respond when we have been hurt says more about who we are. There's a bit of work I'd like you to do about Clarissa today. Take a look at the assignment below this video.